those.
Cool.
All right, Sam, I'm going to continue on with our Olympic theme.
Cool.
Yeah. And as we know, our Winter Olympics are going to be in South Korea. And, Sam and I were talking before about the rings. One of the interesting things, the rings are 5 different colors. Every flag that from a country that's going to be in the Olympics, at least one of those colors are in their flags. That's why we have those colors on the rings. But the Olympics are going to be in South Korea. And it's going to be interesting if you're watching them on TV, because you're going to see that there's going to be a big difference between what time it is there in South Korea and what time it is for us over here in New York State. Now, we talked about before about time zones, and you see it a lot even with the football games, that the West Coast here is 3 hours behind us, and games start at 1 and 4 for that reason. But often, sometimes you see programs announced that says it's 8 o'clock here, 9 o'clock Central or something like that. But not only do we have to deal with time zones, but this jagged line here is going to be very important. That line is called the International Date Line. So let's look what's going to be happening. All right? When this show ends today at 5 o'clock today, it is going to be 7 a.m. Friday, actually tomorrow morning in South Korea, where the Olympics are going to be. How could it be the next day? Well, that has to do a little bit with time zones and that international date line. So let's take a look at that. This map kind of shows how the time zones are arranged, okay? And here, this UTC, that's where Greenwich, England is. Now, that's the prime meridian, and that's going to be important because we use that as the starting point. If you look on here, going to the left, notice it's got negative numbers, and going to the right, we have positive numbers. Well, why is that? Well, when we look at the time zones, and here is where we are in upstate New York, and here is where we are in South Korea over here, we see that we got a difference of all these time zones, and we've got to also look at the day. So let's look here. Time zones are 15 degrees wide. Each 15 degrees longitude is a time zone. Well, why is that? Well, Sam's talked about before that a circle has 360 degrees. The globe is round. And because the globe rotates in 24 hours, if we divide that 360 by 24, we get 15. So that means our Earth rotates at 15 degrees per hour. So every 15 degrees then would be a time zone. And the time zones got started really not that long ago with the railroads, when they found that they had to be able to get times that would make sense from one area to the next for the trains to run. Now, we started this prime meridian. Every 15 degrees is 1 hour. And if we went eastward, the time would be later. If we go westward, the time would be earlier. Now, that's because of the rotation of the Earth. So, for example, right now here in Rochester, where our show is, and it's almost 5 o'clock, it isn't 5 o'clock yet in the West Coast because the Earth hasn't rotated that far. But in England, it was 5 o'clock 5 hours earlier because of the direction of the Earth's rotation. And so that's why when we travel to the east, the time is going to be later. It's already happened there. When we head to the west, it's going to be earlier. It hasn't happened there yet. All right, let's look at the next step here. So now here we are again with that same map. And if we look at Rochester, if we go this way now, remember we would be going eastward, the times would be later, and notice that we'd be adding an hour each time. If we went this way, we'd have to the west, the times would actually be earlier, we'd have to subtract an hour. All right, now, let's talk about those time zones. I said they would go every 15 degrees, and this isn't a great map, it didn't Xerox well. But those time zones then are centered on every 15 degrees. So for example, we said at the prime meridian, that's the 0 time zone, and those 15 degrees is centered on that 0. So 7.5 degrees to the east and 7.5 degrees to the west would be where the time zone would change. So for us here in New York State, that 75 degree line of longitude runs pretty much right through here, through the eastern part of New York State, all right? Comes pretty close to going up here through Madison County and right down near the New York-New Jersey border, but that's where that 75 degree line of longitude is. So 7.5 degrees to the west and the east, all of New York State is in the same time zone. So we're all in this eastern time zone, and even as far as Detroit's in our time zone, but between Detroit and Chicago, it would change to the central. All right, so there's our 75 degree time zone. Ooh. Okay, now if we were looking on the big map here, if it's 5 p.m. here right now, or will be at the end of the show on Thursday, and that's our Eastern Standard Time, if we go to the to the west, it'd be 4 o'clock in the central, 3 o'clock in the mountain, 2 o'clock when we get to the western. And notice as we go, each one's going to be later. But here is where we're going to see something unusual here at the 180 degrees. That's that international date line. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. If we went back to the east, if it's 5 o'clock here, it's going to be 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. It's going to be later going in that direction all the way to, if we went to the prime meridian, it'd be 10 o'clock there tonight. They're 5 hours difference. There it's 5 times 15, 75. We're 5 time zones different. All right, let's talk about the international date line. That's the unusual one. That's at 180 degrees, all right? So 0 degrees is the prime meridian, so halfway around the Earth, the opposite side would be that 180 degrees, and that's the international date line. Those two don't have a direction on it. Every other longitude is either going to be measured east or west of the prime meridian. Now, it's opposite the prime meridian, but if we think of it as being a full circle, one side of that circle would be the prime meridian, and then at the poles, it would switch to the international date line. Now, here's what happens to the international date line. If we travel westward across the international date line, so if you took off from California and you were flying over to South Korea to watch the Olympics, as you cross that international date line, the day would advance. The time wouldn't change, but the day advances. So we saw back on that map a minute ago, if it was 7 p.m. on Thursday, here, as you went to the other side, it'd be 7 p.m. on Friday. The whole day switches that international date line. Same thing coming back. As you come back eastward, you would then go back a day. So let's look at what happens here. Now remember I said it was 180 degrees, but this doesn't look like a 180 degree straight line. Well, one of the reasons they put the international date line where it was so they'd be out in the ocean, not over land, which would make things kind of confusing if the day changed every time you went across it. And then countries wanted to have their whole country in the same day, so notice this is all part of Alaska and the United States here. We jog this way, back and forth, and it looks like a very irregular line, but it works out that all the land masses that are associated with each other then can be in the same day. So that's that international date line. So back to the map we had earlier, at 5 o'clock today when it ends, all this area here that's not shaded will be Thursday. All this area that's kind of shaded from this side over will actually be in Friday. Okay, and the other place, notice where it changes, is at midnight. Remember, at midnight we change to the next day. So to kind of wrap all this up, there we go. When it's 5 o'clock at the end of the show today, it's actually going to be 7 a.m. tomorrow, Friday, in South Korea, where the Olympics are going to be. So next week, when the Olympics are on and you're watching for things, it's going to be kind of unusual because they maybe say it's the next day there, or the times are going to be different, but really, it's all relative. It's what we plan to call them. So enjoy watching the Olympics. There's going to be a lot to watch, and you'll learn a little bit of time zones while you're doing it.